Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be my April half wrap up. And I'm also going to be including a few books that I read at the end of March that were not part of my Trans-Race Readathon vlog. The background is different than usual because I am dog sitting. Here's some footage of the dogs. The lab is named Keone and the little one I think is a Yorkie of some type. And her name is the G slur. We're gonna call her G girl. She's adorable. Also, enjoy my new green streak in my hair. So 2 of the books that I finished in March were for the Diverse Baseline Challenge. So this was for a book about a character or by an author whose religion is different than the one you grew up with. I picked Does My Head Look Big in This? Because the main character and the author are Muslim and also Palestinian Australian. So that's how I heard about this book. This one is about our main character being 16 and deciding that she's going to start wearing hijab. So it's about that and how people treat her differently now that she is wearing that. Also having a crush and having friends, difficulties with friends who have really strict parents and sexist parents. Also learning not to judge people and to get to know them first before deciding what kind of person they are, and how people are more complicated than you think. To me, the character read a little bit younger than 16, but I had an odd upbringing slash childhood slash personality as a teenager, so I think that is actually what a lot of 16-year-olds are like. And unlike a lot of fantasy protagonists who are 16, she didn't have to grow up quickly to deal with, you know, magical problems and war and stuff. I ended up liking it quite a bit and gave it 4 stars. Then for one of the other prompts was a book by an Indigenous author, and I had already started The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. This is an odd book. It does kind of remind me of The Night Watchman though, which is also by Louise Erdrich. But it's very different from, say, The Birchbark House by this author. It is about a woman's life. It starts when she is a naive young person who gets fooled into doing something illegal and gets locked up for quite a while for it. There's a fair amount of time spent on that, and then a lot of the focus is on later in her life. She's married, she gets a job at a bookstore, an Indigenous bookstore. Then a lady who is a common customer there dies and then seems to be haunting the place. After she reads a particular sentence in a book, she dies on the spot. And so I think that's what The Sentence refers to. And then the end of the book takes place during the COVID-19 pandemic and the Black Lives Matter protests. A lot of it feels very not grounded, but that part felt very grounded and kind of different from the rest of the book. And yeah, the haunting part's quite creepy, but ultimately I liked it. It's not my favorite genre. I don't even know what genre it is other than contemporary fabulism, maybe? But the whole character focused thing versus plot focused thing is not usually my cup of tea, but I think that Louise Erdrich does it really well, so I will accept it from her. 4 stars. Then I also read The Other Bennet Sister in March. I had heard good things about this and I ultimately really liked it. This is about Mary Bennet, who, if you're familiar with the story, is the middle sister, the middle child of 5 Bennet sisters, and she gets ignored a lot by both everyone in her family and a fair amount by the narrative of Pride and Prejudice. So this story is all about her, and some of it takes place during Pride and Prejudice, most of it takes place afterwards. And this one I would call a historical fiction rather than a romance, although there is a romantic subplot. It is mostly about Mary developing as a person and kind of explains why she is the way she is in Pride and Prejudice, possible explanations for that, as well as how she may have developed afterwards in the different environments she would be put in after the events of Pride and Prejudice. I thought the romance was really sweet. I also really liked her relationship with the Gardeners. That is her aunt and uncle from the book. And I ultimately liked her relationship with Lizzie as well. One thing it focuses on a fair amount is something that was focused on also in Pride and Prejudice, is the unhappiness of the marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, and the questionable happiness of Charlotte Lucas and the person that she marries in the book. And there's a lot of discussion of different types of romantic relationships and marriages and how those would have played out at the time, and the different reasons that people got married, and the totally different dynamics that their households would have based on the relationship between the two in the couple. So that was all very interesting, and I just generally had a lovely time. I was always excited to get in the car or settle down to some chores and listen to this. So I gave it 4.5 stars. Then starting April, I started another audiobook, for this time for the disability refund, which is going on right now, which I should have talked about a little earlier on in previous videos. But that is happening, and I'm basically just trying to up my number of reads that are by disabled authors and feature disabled characters during this month. It is Autism Awareness Month. I'm trying to focus on that a little bit, but I have so many different TBRs for different things that it's a little bit of a frazzle to do that. But A Face for Picasso, I listened to an audiobook, and this is the memoir from birth to 21 years old, I think, of Ariel, who was born with Cruzon syndrome, and her twin was also. Cruzon syndrome is something where the baby's skull fuses when it's supposed to still be pliant and able to sort of separate for the purposes of growth, so that the head can get as big as an adult can eventually grow into an adult skull. But with a fused skull, it squeezed their brains and everything that's supposed to be going on in their head. So their mother had to work to get doctors to believe that something was actually wrong in the first place, because of course she did. But once they figured out what was going on, the skulls were fused, they had to, at various times during childhood, when the interior parts of the head, the brain especially, and also the airways developed, they had to multiple times break apart the skull and expand it, which was traumatizing. And the author talks about the results of that trauma and how it played out in her body with pain and panic and various symptoms of PTSD that are quite, down the line. That's what PTSD looks like. Her and her sister had different symptoms and different reactions, but they were all related to trauma. And sometimes we don't always think of medical trauma, I don't at least, as things that like having to have a lot of surgeries. I usually think of it as medical abuses, where somebody actually did something wrong or treated you badly, but it can also be just going through surgeries, especially as a child, especially repeated, especially brain surgery or skull surgery, and the recovery from that, and sometimes having bad recovery from that, is all traumatic, whether or not it was necessary and had to be done for their health and survival. It can still traumatize a person. That was a helpful perspective and information for me. It is a lot about the concept of beauty and ugliness. The title is related to Picasso and how he used deformity in his work, and how he would deform women who looked average in order to portray their personalities in the way that he wanted to, and it talks a lot about how abusive he was and how he basically portrayed people as disfigured because he was afraid of disfigured people and basically was extremely ableist. And so it talks a lot about that, and I don't know if you need to be chewing as hard as, can you hear her chewing on that? I'm gonna take them for a WALK once I'm finished with this video. They've already been on one today. Don't rip that apart, you goofy dog. Yeah, and it talks a lot about how society views disfigurement and differences in appearance, facial differences, limb differences, things like that. And the idea of there being a mathematical equation for beauty rather than something that is totally subjective. And it's a lot about how her peers and how adults treated her badly because she was disfigured. And yeah, that was really painful to listen to. It was also painful to listen to the descriptions of the surgeries and their difficult sometimes recoveries. So yeah, it was upsetting to read, but also really good to read. I have read limited things by people with facial differences and disfigurements, so I'm glad to add that perspective to things that I have heard about. I think I'm going to start putting a trigger... You're being rude. I think I'm going to start putting trigger... I think I'm going to start putting trigger warnings as complete list as I can come up with for all the books I read in the description. It's just a little bit of extra typing and copying and pasting work that I haven't done in the past, but I'm going to try to do that going forward. But I will also give verbal descriptions that I will try to warn you of, like major triggers or things that are triggers that are like very common across a lot of people. So in this one we have a lot of medical trauma, of course, a lot of ableism, and also disordered eating. Rating memoirs is weird, but on the quality of writing, I think I would give it a 4.5. Once again, anything that is written in a non-linear format, maybe not the best for reading on audio, and this is non-linear, so sometimes it's confusing, like, okay, is she talking about something that's happening in the same timeline as this other thing, or is this at a different time? Did it happen before? Did it happen after? And then we switch back to the thing that was happening in a different time, and it's like a little confusing. So I would recommend reading this one physically, but I do much better with memoirs in general listening to them on audiobook, so that's why I did that. Then the rest of these are KU books. So Outdrawn by Deanna Gray. This one is rivals to lovers. More time spent while they're lovers than while they're rivals. But it's two ladies who start to work for the same comic company and are also competing to try to win an online competition making online comics. So in that area they're kind of rivals, whereas they're more co-workers on working on a particular comic for this company together, while also being somewhat rivals because they have different ideas about where the comic they're co-writing should go, or they're co-illustrating. I really liked it. I really liked the description, the showing of one of the families as being pretty toxic and needing to cut ties sometimes, and kind of how that feels and when and why it might be necessary, as well as standing up to a family and setting boundaries, and how some families can be difficult but are still healthy enough that they can stay in your life. I think there were spicy scenes, but I don't remember them. I think I must have skipped them because I wasn't in the mood. But yeah, overall the romance was really sweet. And yeah, I recommend it. I really love webcomics and starting to love more comics in general. especially, you know, indie comics and non superhero ones, or ones that are about non-DC or Marvel superheroes. Then we have The Demon's Bargain by Katie Robert. This is in a series I've been reading for a while. Basically every time I get on KU, it's monster romances, and basically it's a bargain where a human agrees to spend time with a monster of some sort. There's no requirement for them to have sex or anything like that, and they have to stay for a certain amount of time. But they don't have to have romance, they just tend to, because that's how the romances go. So it's a little bit like arranged marriage type stuff, where they have arranged to spend time together, and if something happens, it happens. And a lot of them end up together pretty quickly because they're just very horny. And this one is about one of the demons who takes care of and watches over the various humans who make the bargains. I don't remember, but they're non-binary, and they are blind. They don't have eyes specifically. They kind of see kind of visually with magic. It gives them kind of pictures, kind of a picture that's built from other senses, and they can get overwhelmed fairly easily with too much sensory input. And I like this one. It was just a novella, about 150 pages, and it was sweet and cute, and I gave it 4 stars. Then Only for a Week by Natasha Bishop. This one I had heard about on TikTok, and I think other places too. And it is about rich Black people, contemporary, and it is about a lady who has an ex-boyfriend who's now marrying her sister, and she's not upset about it because she just didn't vibe with the boyfriend. Amicable breakup and everything. But he has a best friend who crushed on her while she was with his friend, and so he like distanced himself so that he wouldn't feel tempted to do anything about it. And now that she's single, the way is clear for him to be openly interested in her, and so he starts lavishing her with love and affection and sexual gratification and expensive things. I enjoyed her hopes and dreams and her personality and everything going on with her family. Compared to her, we know a lot less about him and like his hopes and dreams and his family. But that's all right. It was mostly about how much he adores her and how much he's willing to do for her and how protective he is. And that's not terrible. It's just he wasn't quite as fleshed out as I would have liked compared to the other character. This one also has themes of some family are toxic and you need to come to a place where you're willing to do something about that. Then we have Mother Country by Tefram. This is 100 pages. It's pretty short. And this one is also by a Palestinian author, and is about someone who was born in Palestine in a small apartment. Her mother grew up in a refugee camp, and her mother has a lot of issues surrounding poverty and abusive husband and not being loved by her family when she grew up, and she super passes this on, does not even try, in fact is actively like, I went through bad things so you should go through bad things, towards her kids, specifically her daughter. And our main character is trying to break the chain of generational trauma and generational abuse and is trying to be different, even though she ends up in somewhat similar circumstances to her mother's. Her situation is slightly improved and she has some room to change things and to turn herself into the kind of person who can love her daughters, who can love her children better than her mother loved her. And I think that's really lovely. Painful at times, but really a very positive journey overall. So I really liked it. This one, if you're on KU, you can also listen to the audiobook of it, which I did. Actually, I think it's only 50 pages, not 100. It's very short. and I think really well done. Then lastly, I finished The Lady and the Orc by Finley Fenn. This is a series I've also read quite a bit about. I've also read quite a bit of. This is the Orc Sworn series, which you would have heard me talk about before if you've been around longer than 8 months. Another favorite whenever I get on KU. And this is romances between orcs and humans. There are no women orcs. There are non-binary orcs. But in order to reproduce, they have to have kids with humans. And this one is actually the first in the series, which I hadn't read before. I wasn't totally interested in it because the hero is like described as the biggest and baddest of the orcs, and I don't really like the biggest and the baddest. But surprisingly, he actually has more social skills than a lot of the orcs in the rest of the series, and actually understands women a little bit better. Doesn't have quite as bad communication as a lot of them, and understands a few things. So that was kind of fun. And he's also generally a big softie, which is an appealing part of all of these books. I don't think any of them have not turned out to be big softies. There are miscommunications and there are cultural differences. One of my favorite parts about the series is the cultural differences between orcs and humans, and how that leads to misunderstandings, and how they have to work together to make each other understand and to understand the other person. Miscommunication that isn't based on you couldn't bother talking to each other, but is actually based on like not having the language to properly communicate with each other and having to work past that. That is a favorite trope of mine. So yeah, I ended up really liking it and gave it 4.5 stars. Once again, the sex scenes are not to my taste, but I really like the emotions and the angst and the softness of the big tough orcs. Yes, okay, I'm finishing. And that is what I read in the first. That's what I've read in the first half of April. Thank you so much for watching. Do check out the Pages for Palestine readathon, which I will have a video about already out. And lots of information about that linked below. There is a campaign to get a family out of Gaza that I'm trying to support, that I will also link information about below. Apparently she's gonna sit here now. You're very cute. Yes, you're very cute. This family has a few disabled members, which is what brought them to my attention, but I will also link the entirety of Operation Olive Branch, which is about getting people out of Gaza. And if you are not able to donate, I encourage you to share and spread awareness, and also to read books by Palestinians, which is what the readathon is also about. Okay. Bye-bye.